My name is David Chen, and 2 weeks ago my mother knocked on my door for the first time in 10 years. I remember standing in my penthouse apartment in downtown Manhattan, holding a glass of 1995 Chateau Margaux, watching the evening lights flicker to life across the city skyline. It was a Thursday night. I was alone, as I often was these days. Despite the wealth, the success, the business empire I'd built from nothing, my phone buzzed with a message from my assistant confirming tomorrow's meeting with a venture capital firm that wanted to invest $500 million into my tech company. I deleted the message without responding. Money had stopped mattering to me years ago. What mattered was something else entirely, something darker. Something I'd been nursing like a wound that refused to heal. The doorbell rang at 8:47 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. My building had security. Visitors had to be announced. Yet when I checked the intercom, there she was, a woman I hadn't seen since I was 23 years old. Her face smaller than I remembered. Her hair completely gray where it used to be black as coal. "David," she said, and her voice cracked on my name. "Please, I need to talk to you." I didn't buzz her in. I should have. Some part of me, the part that still remembered being loved, wanted to. But the stronger part of me, the part that had been forged in hardship and tempered in betrayal, kept my finger off that button. "How did you get past security?" I asked through the speaker. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, hear the slight whimper that escaped her throat. "I told them I was your mother," she said. They said you'd left instructions that I should always be let up if I ever came." I had. 12 years ago. In a moment of weakness, I'd left those instructions. I never thought I'd need to change them. I never thought she'd actually come. "Go away, Mom," I said, and the word mom felt like poison in my mouth. "There's nothing for you here." But I buzzed her up anyway. I opened the door and barely recognized her. She'd aged decades in 10 years. Her face was deeply lined, her hands trembling, her body bent as though she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. She was wearing a cheap coat from a department store I'd never heard of. And her shoes, God, her shoes were nearly falling apart. "David," she said, and tears immediately began streaming down her face. "Oh, David, my baby." She reached out to embrace me, but I stepped backward, leaving her standing in the doorway. The apartment was cold around her, all steel and glass and modern minimalism. There was nothing warm in it, nothing that suggested a human with a heart lived there. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Sit down." She sat on the edge of my white designer sofa like it might bite her. I remained standing, looking down at her the way a judge might look at someone being sentenced in court. "How are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. 5 minutes, Mom. That's all you get. Use them wisely." She took a shaky breath and began to speak, and as she did, the walls of my carefully constructed present began to crack, revealing the past I'd spent a decade trying to bury. "To understand where we'd come to, you have to understand where we started. I was the eldest of 3 children. I had a younger brother, Michael, and a sister, Jennifer. We grew up in a modest house in New Jersey, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. My father, Robert Chen, was a traditional man, a successful accountant who believed in hard work, discipline, and obedience. My mother, Linda, was a homemaker who'd given up her own dreams to support the family. Our household operated on certain unspoken rules. You got good grades, you respected authority, you followed the path that was laid out for you, and most importantly, you did what was best for the family, not what was best for yourself. I was 18 when I fell in love with Sarah Morrison. She was the daughter of our neighbor, a Protestant girl with red hair and freckles around her smile. She was kind, intelligent, and completely wrong according to my parents' worldview. They had big plans for me. I was supposed to marry a nice Chinese girl from a good family, preferably one whose parents were wealthy. I was supposed to help my father build his accounting firm. I was supposed to produce grandchildren who would carry on the family name and traditions. Sarah wasn't part of that plan. When I told my parents I was dating her, my father's face turned the color of a bruise. I'd never seen him so angry. "This is not acceptable," he said, his voice quiet, but shaking with fury. We were all sitting in the living room after dinner. Michael and Jennifer had been sent upstairs. "You will end this relationship immediately." "I'm not going to do that," I said. I was 19 years old and stupid with the confidence of youth. "I love her." My mother made a small sound, almost a whimper. She reached for my father's arm, but he shook her off. "You love her? You're a child. You know nothing about love. You know nothing about responsibility, about duty, about what it means to be part of this family. This is not love, this is infatuation. This is teenage hormones, and it is not going to happen in my house." "I'm not asking permission," I said. "I'm telling you what's happening." The words hung in the air like a slap. If you stay with this girl, my father said, each word carefully enunciated, you are no longer my son. You will not live in this house. You will not have access to your college fund. You will not be part of this family. Do you understand me? I am giving you a choice, David. Choose her, and choose poverty. Choose us, and choose your future. I looked at my mother. Surely she would speak up. Surely she would advocate for me, would try to soften his position, would do something. But she just sat there with tears running down her face, silent. I choose Sarah, I said. And I meant it. My father was a man of his word. Within a week, I was out of the house with a single suitcase and $200 in my pocket. My mother wanted to help me. I could see it in her eyes whenever my father left the room. But she didn't. She chose him. She chose the family structure, the order, the way things were supposed to be. She chose safety over her own son. Sarah's family, to their credit, took me in. Her parents were good people who didn't understand the depths of the cultural divide between us, but they tried. They really did. I worked at her father's hardware store while I took night classes at a community college. Sarah was in her second year at a private university, and she'd cry sometimes because she wanted to help more, but her parents had limited means. For 2 years, I didn't speak to my family. Not a word. I saw my mother once at a grocery store, and she cried and tried to hug me, but I walked past her like she was a stranger. I saw my younger brother at a basketball game and pretended I didn't know him. I hardened myself against them, turning every ounce of hurt and rejection into fuel for my work. When I was 21, I asked Sarah to marry me. It was a simple proposal. I didn't have money for a ring, so I used my grandmother's, and she said yes without hesitation. We got married in a small civil ceremony with her parents and 2 of her friends as witnesses. I didn't invite my family. I didn't even tell them it was happening. 3 days after the wedding, my mother came to find me at the hardware store. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. Why didn't you tell us? She asked. Why couldn't you let us be there? Because you made it clear I wasn't part of this family anymore, I said. I was stocking shelves, refusing to look at her. You chose Dad over me. You let him throw me out. So this is what happens when you do that. You don't get to be part of my life. David, please. Your father. He just needs time. He loves you. He's just angry because he thinks he's protecting you. I don't want his love. I don't want anything from him. And I don't want anything from you. You made your choice a long time ago. Now live with it. The pain in her eyes was real, but I'd become very good at ignoring real pain. I learned that if you feel it, it destroys you. So the only way to survive is to pretend it doesn't exist. She left, and I didn't see her again for 10 years. The years between 21 and 31 were the hardest and best of my life, often at the same time. Sarah and I lived in a cramped apartment in Newark. We were poor, genuinely poor. The kind of poor where you count your change before buying groceries. The kind where you wear the same clothes until they fall apart. The kind where an unexpected car repair can ruin your entire month. Sarah got pregnant when I was 23. We had a beautiful daughter named Emma. I was there when she was born, holding her wet little body in my hands. And I made a promise to her silently, in the hospital, while Sarah slept, that I would never, ever let her feel what I had felt. I would never abandon her. I would never choose anything over her. I would spend my entire life making sure she knew she was loved. The next 2 years were chaos. Emma cried constantly. Sarah was depressed, not diagnosed, but I could see it in her face, in her inability to get out of bed some days. We fought about money constantly. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, and we still barely made ends meet. When Emma was 2, I had what I could only describe as a moment of clarity. I was working the late shift at a restaurant, washing dishes, and it was 2 a.m. And I was so tired I could barely see straight. My hands were raw from the water and the cleaners. My back hurt. My feet hurt. Every muscle in my body ached. And I thought about my father, about how he told me I'd chosen poverty, and how he was right. I had. But not because I wanted to. Because I refused to crawl back and beg for forgiveness for the crime of loving someone he didn't approve of. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to wash dishes forever. I wasn't going to let my father be right about me. I was going to build something. I was going to become so successful, so wealthy, so undeniably powerful that no one would ever be able to tell me what to do again. Not my father. Not anyone. I was fortunate or cursed, depending on how you look at it, to enter the tech industry in the mid-2000s, right as the internet was exploding. I started teaching myself to code using free resources online. I learned in the early mornings before work and the late nights after Sarah went to bed. I was hungry in a way that other people couldn't understand. I didn't want to succeed. I needed to succeed. At 25, I got my first real tech job as a junior developer. It paid $30,000 a year. Sarah cried when I told her not sad tears, but relief tears. We could almost breathe now. I worked that job while continuing to learn everything I could about software development, about business, about entrepreneurship. I attended every conference I could afford. I read every book about building companies. I made connections, networked, positioned myself. At 27, I quit my job and started my first company with $1,000. I'd saved and a business partner named Marcus who'd been my friend since high school. That company failed spectacularly. We burned through our money in 3 months and had nothing to show for it. I borrowed money from my mother-in-law, which killed me, because I hated owing anyone anything, and Sarah had to go back to work. She started cleaning houses, which broke my heart. Because she'd gone to college, she'd had potential. And here she was scrubbing toilets because of me. It's not because of you, she told me, and she meant it. She was the strongest person I've ever known. We're doing this together. We're building something together. But I felt like I was dragging her down. I started my second company at 28. This one was a web development firm that created websites for small businesses. It was unglamorous and boring, but it made money. Steady money. Money I could count on. By 30, I'd grown that company to a 6-figure revenue stream. We had 4 employees. We had a real office with our name on the door. I was starting to breathe easier, but I wasn't satisfied. I couldn't be satisfied, because satisfaction is what kills hunger, and hunger was the only thing keeping me alive. At 31, I sold my web development firm for $2.3 million. So, when my mother sat on my white designer sofa in my penthouse apartment and looked at me with desperate eyes, I was a very different person than the boy she'd known. "David," she said, "your father is dying." Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't show it. I'd gotten very good at not showing things. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my voice neutral. "He has pancreatic cancer. The doctors say he is maybe 6 months, maybe less." I said nothing. I turned and walked to the window, looking out at the city stretched before me like a kingdom I'd conquered alone. "He wants to see you," she continued. "He wants to apologize. He wants to. Before he dies, he wants to make things right with you." "Things can't be made right," I said. "Some things are broken permanently. You taught me that." I could hear her struggling to breathe behind me, small hitching sounds of grief. "I know I failed you," she said. "I know I should have fought harder for you. Should have left him. Should have done something. And I've lived with that every single day for 10 years. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you, that I haven't regretted every choice I made." I turned to look at her. Up close, I could see how much the years had aged her. There was a thinness to her that spoke of illness or stress or heartbreak, or all 3. "Then why didn't you reach out?" I asked. "Why did you wait until he was dying? Why didn't you just come find me?" "Because I was ashamed," she whispered. "Because I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. Because I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had. Because I was a coward." At least she was honest. I had to give her that. "Your father, after you left, he changed. Michael dropped out of high school. Jennifer started having problems at school. Your father blamed himself. He was miserable. He kept saying he'd been too harsh, that he should have. He talked about you constantly, about the things he should have said, the things he should have done differently. But he didn't come find me," I said flatly. "He had 10 years to do that. He had my address. The superintendent of the building knew I lived here. He could have come. He chose not to, because he was proud," my mother said. "And because he was waiting for you to come home. He kept thinking you'd come back, that you'd realize he was right, that you'd want to reconcile. And when you didn't, when years kept passing, he couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap. He was too proud and too ashamed and too stubborn and too broken." I felt something crack inside me at her words, but I forced it down. Weakness was the enemy. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't help you with this. I moved on a long time ago." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see something shifting in her expression. The desperation faded, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe, or disappointment. "You did move on," she said quietly. "You moved on and you became everything he wanted you to be, and you did it all alone. Without him, without us. And now you're here, and you're rich, and you're successful, and you're completely alone. And you think that's a victory." "It is a victory," I said. "Is it?" she asked. "Is it really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you won a battle and lost the war. You've proven you didn't need us, but what have you actually gained? Money, a penthouse. Look around you, David. Where is the life? Where is the joy? Where are the people who love you?" "I have Emma," I said. "I have Sarah." "Do you?" She stood up, steadying herself on the arm of the sofa. When was the last time you saw your daughter? When was the last time you had a real conversation with your wife? I didn't answer because I couldn't. Emma was away at boarding school, an excellent boarding school, the best money could buy. Sarah and I had separated 2 years ago. She still lived in the house I bought her, still had everything she could possibly want materially, but we barely spoke. I came here hoping that maybe, at the very least, my son might have enough compassion to say goodbye to his father before he dies. My mother said, I see now that I was wrong. The man who lived in that house, the boy who loved his sister and helped his brother with his homework, and made his mother laugh at breakfast, he's gone. You killed him, and I don't know who you are. She walked toward the door, and I felt something inside me clawing to break free, screaming at me to stop her, to say something, to do something. But I locked it down as I'd locked down everything else. Tell him ... I started, then stopped. Tell him goodbye. At the door, she turned back. No, she said. You tell him goodbye. That's the least you owe him. That's the least you owe yourself. And then she was gone. I didn't see my father before he died. I told myself it was because I was busy, because my company was in the middle of a critical merger, because I didn't have the emotional energy to deal with my complicated family trauma. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. I was afraid. He died on a Tuesday. I found out about it when my assistant mentioned that my mother had left several voicemails. I listened to the last one. David, your father passed away this morning, peacefully in his sleep. The funeral is Saturday at St. Catherine's Church at 2 p.m. I hope you'll come. I'm enclosing his will and some other documents. Whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, you were always his son. You always will be. I didn't go to the funeral. I told my assistant to send flowers and a generous donation to the church. I went to work instead and closed a deal worth $800 million. That night, I got drunk for the first time in 5 years. I drank alone in my penthouse, surrounded by everything I'd ever wanted. And I felt absolutely nothing. Or rather, I felt too much, a chaos of emotions so intense that they canceled each other out into a kind of numbness. Sarah came over the next morning. She'd seen the news about my father's death on social media and wanted to check on me. Are you okay? She asked, standing in my kitchen in the clothes she'd clearly thrown on that morning. She looked beautiful and tired and concerned. I'm fine, I said. David, your father died. I know. And you're fine? I'm fine, I repeated. I didn't have a relationship with him. He was a stranger who shared my DNA. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the moment she made a decision. Not a sudden decision, something that had been coming for a long time. I'm filing for divorce, she said quietly. I should have done it 2 years ago when I moved out, but I kept hoping ... I kept thinking, maybe you'd come back. That the real you would come back. But he's not coming back, is he? You've killed him. You've killed everything good in yourself to become this. She gestured around the apartment at the expensive art, the designer furniture, the enormous windows, and all the money that had bought everything in the space. You've won, she continued. You've proven everyone wrong. You've built an empire, and you've made more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. But you've done it by cutting out every part of yourself that was capable of being loved. And I can't live with that. I can't live with the ghost of the man I married. I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't. Because she wasn't. Where will you go? I asked. Back to school, she said. I've been accepted to a master's program in social work. I'm going to help people. I'm going to build a life that means something other than accumulating more and more nothing. When she left, she took the key to the penthouse but left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I stared at that ring for a long time, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry. The months after my father's death and Sarah's departure were the darkest of my life. Even darker than the days of poverty, because at least then I'd had purpose. I worked constantly. I grew my company. I bought smaller companies and absorbed them. I invested in startups and watched them become unicorns. By 34, I was worth $3 billion. On paper, I was one of the most successful men in the country. In practice, I was miserable. I lived in the penthouse. I dated women I didn't care about. I made decisions that affected thousands of people's livelihoods. I bought things constantly: art, houses, cars, jewelry, and felt nothing when I acquired them. The dopamine hit that acquisition used to give me had long since stopped working. I barely saw Emma. She was 16, in her final years of boarding school, and we spoke maybe once a month. When we did speak, I could hear the disappointment in her voice. She'd wanted a father and instead gotten a bank account that transferred money to her school bills. One day, I was in my office on the 92nd floor of a building I owned. and my assistant came in to tell me that my sister Jennifer wanted to see me. I hadn't heard from Jennifer in 12 years. I told her I was busy, but my assistant, a woman named Carol, who had worked for me for 6 years and was one of the few people on Earth who seemed to like me, pushed back. "She's been waiting downstairs for an hour," Carol said. "I think you should at least talk to her." So I did. Jennifer looked like my mother had looked when she came to the penthouse, older than she should have, worn down by life. But she was also beautiful, in a way our mother wasn't, with dark eyes that were startlingly similar to mine. "Hi, David," she said when she came into my office. She stood awkwardly, not sure if she should sit or stay standing. "Jennifer, it's been a while." 12 years, she said, "since you left, since you decided none of us were worth knowing." There was an edge to her voice that surprised me. I'd expected sadness, maybe anger, but this had a rawness to it that suggested deep wounds. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I came to tell you about Michael," she said. "He's in the hospital. He's been struggling with addiction for years, and 3 weeks ago he overdosed. He's alive, but barely. He might not wake up, and I thought you should know, because Michael has never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." I felt something shift in my chest, something I'd thought had died a long time ago. "Where is he?" "Presbyterian Hospital, room 418. I didn't ask how she knew where to find me. I didn't ask what had happened. I just stood up and started moving toward the door. "David," Jennifer said, and her voice cracked. "He talks about you sometimes when the drugs wear off. He says he's sorry. He says he should have done better. He blames himself for not being strong enough to make Dad accept you." I stopped. I turned around and looked at my sister, and I felt 10 years of careful emotional construction crumble. "It's not his fault," I said. "I know that," Jennifer said, "but he doesn't. Neither does Mom. Neither does Dad, God rest him. You know what Dad said before he died? He said he was proud of you. He said it every single day toward the end, like he was trying to say it enough times to make up for not saying it before. Michael was on life support when I got to the hospital. He looked nothing like I remembered. His hair had gone gray. His face was gone, but when I took his hand, I felt him squeeze back just barely. "Michael," I whispered. "It's David. I'm here. I'm sorry it took so long." Over the next 3 weeks, I sat by his bedside almost every moment he was alive. We didn't talk much, he couldn't talk, but I talked to him. I told him about the business, about Emma, about Sarah. I told him about the years I'd spent building my company, about the emptiness of it all. I told him I was sorry for leaving him, for cutting him out, for making him pay for my anger at my father. On the 19th day, he woke up. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment he looked confused. Then his gaze found me, and his eyes filled with tears. "David," his voice was a rasp. "I'm here, Mike. I'm here. I fucked up," he said. "I fucked up so bad." "You didn't fuck up. You were sick. You still are sick. But you're going to get better now. You're going to go to rehab, and you're going to get clean, and you're going to have a life." "How do you know?" he asked. "Because I'm going to make sure of it," I said. "Because I have more money than I know what to do with. And more importantly, because I'm not leaving you again. I'm not leaving this time." I meant it. For the first time in years, I meant something with absolute certainty. Over the next 6 months, I fundamentally changed my entire life. I stepped back from day-to-day operations of my company and hired a CEO, something I should have done years ago. I got a therapist and actually committed to processing my trauma instead of compartmentalizing it. I reconnected with my family, with Jennifer and her 2 kids, with Michael as he went through his recovery, with my mother. My mother and I had a long conversation in her small house, the house I'd grown up in, which she was struggling to keep because my father's medical bills had exhausted their savings. "I paid off your mortgage," I told her, "and I've set up a trust fund for you that will take care of your expenses for the rest of your life." She cried and tried to refuse, but I wouldn't let her. "You failed me," I said to her, and she flinched at the words. "You chose my father over me when I needed you to stand up for me. And I'm not gonna lie and say that didn't hurt, because it did. It hurt so much. But I've spent 10 years being angry about it, and I've realized that you were just a woman doing the best she could in a situation where you felt trapped. That doesn't make what you did okay, but it makes it understandable." "I'm so sorry," she said, and she cried like she hadn't cried in years. "I know," I said, "and I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, but because I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of letting your choices and Dad's choices control my life." I called Emma and told her I was pulling her out of boarding school for her final year. She came home, and for the first time in years, we actually spent time together. We got breakfast, went to movies, talked about her dreams and her fears. She told me she wanted to study environmental science. I told her I'd always support whatever she wanted to do, and I meant it in a way I'd never meant anything in my entire life. I met with my lawyer and rewrote my will. I set up massive charitable foundations for addiction recovery in memory of Michael and for education access for underprivileged students. I gave millions to the schools that had offered me scholarships when I was struggling, and I did something that terrified me. I became vulnerable. I started a relationship with a woman named Helen who worked for a nonprofit focused on at-risk youth. She was nothing like Sarah, less beautiful on the surface, but infinitely more beautiful in every way that mattered. She didn't care about my money. When I told her about my childhood, about my family, about the things I'd done and the person I'd become, she didn't judge me. She just held my hand and listened. The person you were then was doing the best he could with what he had, she said. And the person you are now is trying to do better. That's not nothing. My company eventually went public, and I became one of the youngest billionaires in the country. But I'd finally learned that money wasn't the thing that mattered. Connections mattered. Relationships mattered. Having people who knew you and loved you anyway that mattered more than anything. 2 years after, I reconnected with my family. I bought my father's house from my mother and renovated it. I turned it into a family home, a place big enough for all of us to gather for holidays. Emma moved in temporarily while she figured out her life. Michael lived in a small cottage on the property while he attended community college and worked on his recovery. It was Jennifer who suggested we do something to mark the space. She wanted to make it about healing, about acknowledging what had happened and moving past it. I want to do a ceremony, she said. All of us, to say goodbye to what was and hello to what could be. So on a Saturday morning, we gathered in the backyard of the house where I'd grown up, where I'd been thrown out, where everything had started. My mother spoke about regret and the courage it took to admit when you'd been wrong. Michael spoke about how nearly dying had taught him that family was the only thing that mattered. Jennifer spoke about how she'd spent years resenting me for leaving, but she'd finally understood that people deal with pain differently, and my way of dealing with it hadn't been wrong, just different. Emma spoke about how she wished she'd had a father when she was growing up, but she was glad to have one now. And then it was my turn. I stood in front of my family, and I felt completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and completely alive. I spent 10 years being angry, I said. I spent 10 years proving that I didn't need anyone. I spent 10 years building an empire on a foundation of rage and hurt, and I did it successfully by most measures. I'm more successful than my father ever was. But I built something empty. I built something that had no meaning. I paused, looking at each of them, at my mother, who had failed me, but had also loved me, at my sister, who had waited for me to come back, at my brother, who had almost died, waiting for me to forgive him for something that wasn't his fault, at my daughter, who deserved better than the absent father I'd been. I'm sorry, I continued. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for making you feel like you were responsible for my pain. I'm sorry for punishing you for my father's mistakes. And I'm sorry for taking so long to realize that the only person I've been hurting is myself. I've hurt all of you, but the person I hurt the most was me. I felt tears running down my face, and I didn't try to stop them. But I'm here now, and I'm staying, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the father, the son, the brother you all deserve. Not because I'm perfect, I'm not, but because I finally understand that you matter more than anything I could ever build. My mother came and hugged me, and then Jennifer did, and then Emma, and then Michael, and we all stood there crying in the backyard of that house, letting go of the past so we could finally have a future. Today is the 1-year anniversary of that ceremony. I'm sitting on the porch of the house where I grew up, and my family is inside. Michael is making his famous lasagna. He's actually become an incredible cook, something no one knew about him because he'd been running from himself for so long. Emma is helping him, having deferred her college admission for a year to travel and volunteer. She's going to go to university eventually, but right now she's figuring out who she is without the pressure of proving anything to anyone. Jennifer is organizing family photos that we're going to put on the walls. She's decided to document our healing process, and she's talked about maybe writing a book about it. My mother is on the phone with Helen, planning our engagement party. Yes, Helen and I got engaged, and no, it wasn't because I'd suddenly become a different person. It was because I finally became myself again. I walked away from my company last month. I gave it to my employees, literally gave it to them, setting up an employee stock ownership plan that ensured they'd all benefit from its success. The CEO is doing a better job than I ever could have. The company is more successful than ever, and I don't think about it anymore. I've taken on a new role in my life. I'm now focused on my foundation work, on my family, on Helen. I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I proved everything I needed to prove a long time ago. But this isn't actually where the story ends, because there's one more chapter. Last week, I got a letter. It was addressed to me in my mother's handwriting, but when I opened it, I realized it was in my father's handwriting. It must have been written near the end of his life and kept by my mother all these years. It read, "David, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably angry that I'm writing to you from beyond the grave, trying to make amends when it's too late for me to actually do anything about it. I wouldn't blame you. I was always better with words after the fact than in the moment. Your mother could tell you that. I was wrong about Sarah. I know that now. I was wrong about a lot of things. I was wrong about thinking that I could control your life, control your choices, control what made you happy. I was a scared man trying to hold on to a version of the world that made sense to me. And instead of adapting when the world changed, I pushed people away. I pushed you away. The hardest part of the last 10 years of my life was knowing what I'd done and not knowing how to fix it. Pride. That's what it was. Pure pride. I built this wall around myself, and then I expected everyone else to climb over it to get to me. And when nobody did, or when nobody could, I blame them instead of myself. Your mother tells me you've built something remarkable, that you've accomplished things I always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. I'm proud of you, not because of what you've achieved materially, that's never mattered to me, no matter what I said, but because you've survived. You've taken pain and transformed it into strength. You've taken my failure as a father and used it to teach yourself how to be better. I hope that someday, before the end, you might forgive me. Not for my sake, I won't be here to benefit from that forgiveness, but for yours. Because carrying anger at the dead is like carrying water in your hands. It just slips away, and you're left with nothing but empty palms. I love you, son. I always did. I just wasn't brave enough to let you know. Dad, I read that letter a dozen times. I cried when I read it, and I finally, truly, completely forgave him. Because I understood, in a way I never could have before, that he was just a man. He was scared and limited and trapped by his own beliefs. He did the best he could with the emotional tools he had, which weren't very good tools. And when he realized he'd made a mistake, he didn't have the courage to fix it. I wasn't going to make that same mistake. I wasn't going to let pride keep me from my family. I wasn't going to wait until it was too late to say the things that mattered. Today is my daughter Emma's college graduation. She graduated summa cum laude with a degree in environmental science and is about to start a job with the UN, working on climate change initiatives. Sarah is here. Yes, we're still friends, and she's incredibly proud of our daughter. Michael is 3 years sober and is studying to become an addiction counselor. He wants to help people find their way out of the darkness, the way someone finally helped him find his way out. Jennifer published her book about our family's healing journey. It became a bestseller. People tell her that reading it helped them reconcile with their own families. My mother is healthy and happy and surrounded by people who love her. She's been volunteering at a community center, and she's become one of the most beloved people there. Helen and I are expecting our first child together, a daughter, according to the ultrasound. I'm going to make sure she grows up knowing that she is loved, unconditionally and completely, not because of what she achieves, but because of who she is. I've donated over $1 billion to various causes. I've set up scholarship programs that have funded education for thousands of underprivileged students. I've established treatment centers for addiction in memory of Michael and all the people like him. And I'm happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Not because I have money. Money has nothing to do with it, but because I finally learned what actually matters. People, relationships, the fleeting moments of connection that make life worth living. I think about that moment when my mother knocked on my door 10 years ago, and I think about how easily I could have said no. How easily I could have let her stand out there and never buzzed her in. And where would I be now? Richer, probably. More successful by the metrics society uses. More alone. More empty. But instead, I let her in. And it cost me everything and gave me everything. It cost me my pride, my armor, my carefully constructed walls. And it gave me my life back. My father once told me I had to choose her or the family. I realized I'd been making that choice wrong the entire time. I'd chosen her and abandoned the family. Then I'd chosen the family and abandoned her. What I should have done was choose myself. Choose to become the kind of person capable of loving and being loved by all of them. That's what I finally did. And it was the best choice I ever made. If you're reading this story, and there's someone in your life you haven't spoken to in years, someone you're angry at, or someone who's angry at you, I want to tell you something. It's not too late. Life is short. shorter than you think. And pride is expensive, it costs you. Relationships and connection and all. The small moments of human warmth that make life actually worth living. I spent 10 years proving I didn't need my family. It nearly cost me my daughter. It cost me my marriage. It turned me into someone I barely recognized. Let go of your anger. Let go of your pride. Pick up the phone. Send the email. Drive to their house. Knock on the door. The worst thing that can happen is they don't answer. The best thing that can happen is you get your life back. That's worth the risk. The end. Author's note: this story is a work of fiction, but it's inspired by the real experiences of many people who have navigated family estrangement and reconciliation. The emotions, the struggles, and the eventual healing are all real, even if the specific details are imagined. And remember, it's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to say you're sorry. It's never too late to come home.